May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be always acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I have to admit, I didn't think it was a particularly auspicious beginning to Holy Week when I noticed all the street, no parking signs on the street from the city of Wheaton. I was like, of course, this 1 week, here we go, right? But I'm glad to be here with you all. It's a real privilege to share this sacred holy feast together and to be the people of God in this moment, turning our attention away from selves and towards that deeper story. Earlier this month, 6 simultaneous press conferences were held as the 200-person Event Horizon telescope team revealed images of a black hole. I bet a lot of you saw this, right? The picture. I mean, the truth is, it's not a great picture per se, right? It's not kind of like a piece of art you're going to be amazed at, other than knowing what it took to get the image, right? This light, and at the middle, this thing we call a black hole. They spent nearly 2 decades working to capture this image. And in fact, what you're seeing is the matter being pulled toward the black hole, what's called the event horizon, but not quite inside it yet. Because once it's inside it, you can't see it anymore. What the picture really shows has been described by some as the shadow of a black hole. This scientific endeavor has been about finding a way to see that which can't really be seen directly. You only find it by looking at how it affects the things around it. And as I thought about this, I thought, isn't that really kind of like the resurrection? After all, there's actually no written words which describe that moment itself. Our Gospels don't say a word about the moment of resurrection. The writers of the Gospels don't even try to put it in words. They allow it to be silent. If anything, even the closest to Jesus are described as having trouble believing it happened. Did you hear in today's Gospel what the disciples said when the women came back and told them the tomb was empty? Maybe a little mansplaining happened, right? It's an idle tale, they said. And they did not believe. These are the disciples. An idle tale, they said, and they did not believe. And yet, that relationship with Christ somehow continued. The risen Christ came to them and invited them to see the truth of what had happened. And we witnessed the impact of Jesus returning to be with the disciples after his crucifixion. We witnessed the transformed lives of his followers. We witness what happens at the event horizon. We witness the way the good news spread throughout the world, and the gravity of that moment impacts us even 2,000 years later. Even death could not conquer this kind of love. A love that would not die, a love that will not die. But that's, of course, not to say that living with this kind of love at our center is easy, because it's a love which calls us to carry our cross. In fact, one of the great Christian truths about love, I think, is that love does cost something. And yet we are still called to love with abandon, not fully weighing that cost. Called to love even when it's uncomfortable. Called to love those who don't look like us, or think like us, or love like us, or speak like us, or pray like us, or vote like us. Because being loved, the kind of love Jesus came to make known, the kind of love God has for us, isn't about us earning it or deserving it. It's grace, freely given. And that's a story we need to hear. The story of the cross and the story of the resurrection is that love wins. But here's the funny thing about this sermon, and really all sermons. You've heard them already. The message you hear me preaching now, it's not new. The same sermon with different words is being preached all over the world and has been for thousands of years. In fact, the heart of the message never really changes. We're called to proclaim the good news of God's redemptive love made known by Jesus. Called to remind one another that what Jesus shows us is that to be fully human is to choose love, even when it's difficult. And so week after week and year after year, we're invited to see the resurrection once more. To look towards the edges, not by witnessing it directly, but by looking to the way it's impacted our world and our lives, to the stories of those around us. And we're invited to wonder how the love we give and the love we receive is related to this love made known by Jesus. That is the Easter story, after all. A story of profound love breaking into the world, even through the pain of death and loss. And we are here today because we feel the tug from the gravity of that moment. But I think the question becomes, will we resist it? Will we allow the other forces in our lives to let us deny its impact when we leave here today? Will we become so distracted by our never-ending to-do lists that we forget to live with love at the center and allow that force of gravity to pull us in? Or will we let our lives be transformed by this encounter with the divine, with the risen Christ? Will we let the love and light of God shine through us into the world? I guess the truth is the answer to that question will only be known in the days to come, with the lives we lead and the choices we make. In conclusion today, I'd like to share with you a poem by Maya Angelou, which I think gets to the heart of what it means to truly love. It's called Touched by an Angel. She says, "We, unaccustomed to courage, exiles from delight, live coiled in shells of loneliness until love leaves its high, holy temple and comes into our sight to liberate us into life. Love arrives, and in its train come ecstasies, old memories of pleasure, ancient histories of pain. Yet if we are bold, love strikes away the chains of fear from our souls. We are weaned from our timidity. In the flush of love's light, we dare to be brave, and suddenly we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. In the name of God the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.